Voila.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well.
Good. Good to know that.
How are you?
I'm good.
You have a picture of the Mona Lisa behind you.
And guess what? We're going to be talking about Miss Mona Lisa and the painter, Leonardo da Vinci, today.
Oh, wow. Leonardo, the great Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah. And your birth name has the first four letters of Leonardo.
Yes, it does. And your birth name is?
Caroline.
Caroline.
They call me Carolyn.
Carolyn. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about the great master himself.
Well, Leonardo, he died 500 years ago, and there's been thousands of books written about him, thousands of books written about Mona Lisa. But what brings me to you today is I made an interesting discovery on the Mona Lisa. And for some reason, it's been overlooked for the last 500 years. This copy I have here behind me is an actual 360 facsimile. People always come to me and say, oh, she's so small when they see her in the Louvre. But actually, she's poster size. She's 30 inches in height and 21 inches in width.
Okay. And what's the discovery you made?
Well, so for some reason, for the last 500 years, it's been overlooked, the embroidery found on the bodice of her dress. See, we just all thought it was the motif of the day, an embroidery of four-leaf clovers, teardrops, interlocking chains, but actually it's nothing loopy about it. It's geometrical. It's a mathematical design that he invented.
Wow.
And it didn't belong on a frumpy green wool house dress.
Amazing. Do you know what? I've been to the Louvre, but I don't think, and I'm gonna shame myself here, I don't think I actually ever saw the Mona Lisa. Which is quite extraordinary, and probably next time I go to France, I should.
Well, if you go, basically you have to know you're just paying homage to an icon because you can't get up that close. She's in her bulletproof box. Maybe you just heard last week a guy came into the Louvre pretending he was a woman in a wheelchair, and then he threw a cake at the painting.
Yes, I heard that. So what is your fascination with Leonardo da Vinci?
Well, I really didn't have one. It wasn't like I went to my high school counselor and they said, oh, you're going to be into Leonardo. I think you're going to write a book. Oh, I think you're going to make a discovery. No. That was not my path, my destiny. And I kind of came by it through not the normal channels of being into Leonardo. So mine was more, an experience I had, a very unusual experience that, was kind of hard to language. In 1999, I had moved to Rome, Italy. Remember, it's right at the eve of the millennium. And so like all countries, they were doing something special. Well, for Italy, what they were doing was they had just spent 25 years doing a restoration on Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper in Milan. My friends were coming from the States. They wanted to go to the opening. Frankly, I thought the postcard was like good enough. I was more concerned where I'm going to have lunch that day, but, thought it better be cordial. So Leonardo's Last Supper is like a moment of action. It's when Jesus says to his disciples, one of you will betray me. And then everybody reacts. And I know this sounds very silly to say it, but, when you hear me say this, but I felt I was there. And when I left, I'm like wondering, who is this Da Vinci guy? How is this possible? So when I got back to Rome, I went to the bookstore, got a book on Leonardo da Vinci, was really expecting to find an explanation on what happened to me. And then I started going down a rabbit hole.
You must explain this rabbit hole.
So normally, if you know what you're looking for, you can go and look for it. Like an example, if you're the archaeologist that has studied all your life, the pyramids, and you know where the Valley of the Kings are and the Valley of the Queens. Well, you can make a deduction based on your knowledge where would be the Valley of the Children. Well, I didn't know what I was looking for, just other than I wanted an explanation to what happened to me. So when I moved back to the States, I'm thinking I'm the first person that ever discovered Leonardo da Vinci, and only to find out there are like libraries dedicated to him. There's one at UCLA, in fact. So since I didn't know what I was looking for, other than an explanation to what happened to me, I would just scroll the catalogs. And, I would look at book titles, dissertations, theses. And I remember stumbling by one that said, Leonardo da Vinci's 13 dissections looking for the human soul. I thought, hallelujah, this has got to be it. I'm going to get my explanation. It was very interesting, very, very interesting. One of the very first dissections he does is he pulls out the heart. Why? Because the Greeks said the seat of the soul was located behind the heart. And when he didn't find it, these other dissections, I must have spent a whole year on that. And as Oprah would say, I did not get the aha moment, of what I was looking for. So I now have maybe about 10 years invested in looking for that which I do not know, other than an explanation to what happened to me. So I had this little talk with myself. And remember, this is in 2008 now. So let me paint a context. There's only two ways you could see a painting before the digital era. You either go in person or you look at it in print. In the case of the Mona Lisa, the Louvre owns the copyright. So the resolution is very poor. And if you're going to go in person, you can't get up close enough. Well, after Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, all these, people kind of like me that are doing their own little research on Leonardo da Vinci popped out of the woodwork. I didn't know whether I should feel comforted or like scared out of my mind. But anyway, I have this little dialogue with myself that I'm going to meet one more expert, because now after 10 years, there's only a finite amount of documentation about Leonardo da Vinci if you're going to go through historical documents, right? So now in my mind, I've covered everything, and I still have not found whatever happened to me, an explanation. So now I'm looking outside the box, and this now takes me to Paris. So during this Da Vinci Code, there was one gentleman that he was a painter, an expert painter, but he thwarted his painting career to just study Leonardo da Vinci, how he does the flesh on the Mona Lisa. See, it's always been a mystery. We've never, we can X-ray the paint. See, most artists, when we X-ray the painting, we find telltale signs on how they built up the flesh, for example. There'll be hatch marks. But when we photograph the Mona Lisa, the board's blank. So it was a technique called the sfumato technique. So no one has ever figured out how Leonardo painted the flesh on the Mona Lisa. So this one artist in Paris, which I'm now saying to myself, this is it. You meet this one guy and it's over. So after I met him, he insisted that I meet this French engineer who got access to the real Mona Lisa in the Louvre Museum, that one day a year she comes out of the bulletproof box. And he photographs it with this camera invention of 240 million pixels. Well, so frankly, I had never seen a painting on the internet. This was new to me in 2008, 2009. And so when I went to his office and I saw the Mona Lisa on his computer screen, he had done something very interesting. The Mona Lisa is never going to be restored by human hands. Never. It's just too priceless, too much controversy. But what he was able to do is he did a virtual restoration. So he was able to pull off the 500-year-old varnish, and he redid all the pigments. So now I'm seeing Mona Lisa for the very first time, like when Leonardo da Vinci finished her. Like right now we see her with a green background, but originally he painted her background in lapis lazuli. So she's this beautiful blue background, and it's more, precious than gold, what he used. So that, I wanted everyone on the planet to see what I saw. And so even though I hadn't figured out what it was that I want, what happened to me, I ended up being a rep for these Mona Lisa images that traveled the world. And in traveling the world, one day we were in South Korea. We had just opened the exhibition, and we have this gigantic Mona Lisa in the exhibition, huge. And, I do what I always do, walk around the show. And all of a sudden I'm standing in front of this gigantic Mona Lisa. And of course, the embroidery now, is a good foot high. And all of a sudden my brain and my eyes focus, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, there's nothing loopy about this design. And I thought it just seemed so out of character. And so when I got back home, then I just immersed myself into Italian fashion and motif of the day, to see what was the motif of the day in embroidery. And then that's when, I realized what a big risk Leonardo had made to do this embroidery. See, this particular embroidery would have never been permitted on a frumpy green wool house dress. And at that moment, I knew I had a key. I just had to unlock it. And that's where my last 10 years have taken me.
It's like you're a treasure hunter that found treasure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm really fascinated. What did you discover from the perspective of when you went to see The Last Supper? You said something happened to you, that you were there. What was that moment?
Well, that moment would be if you could take a little, take a crack in time and actually be a fly on the wall when Jesus in that room, can you imagine being in the Last Supper and, witnessing that firsthand? Well, in my mind, I was witnessing that in first person, being there. I know this sounds ridiculous, but,
Not at all. It was
pretty powerful, whatever it was.
It was maybe a mystical moment.
Yes, I would say so.
Kind of rearranged your cells, and you had a moment that is unexplainable.
Right. That's exactly what happened. And I wanted an explanation. I really, I just couldn't shake it off. And the only thing I could say is when I did at that moment in South Korea, when I noticed the embroidery, whatever was globbed onto me, let's just use that term, I felt totally relieved. I didn't know whether I had, quote, made a discovery, but whatever that feeling was, I felt like that is what I had been looking for, that I didn't know I was looking for the last 10 years.
Mm. And have you ever had that feeling again?
No.
So I never have. It was a portal into a specific world or universe or whatever that opened and then closed, but shifted your life completely.
Completely.
Very fascinating. You say it sounds weird, but to me it doesn't. I get it. I get it. Sometimes things happen that are unexplainable, but they happen.
Yes.
And it's a moment in time that changes everything. Mm-hmm. Right? And it took you to where you are today.
Exactly.
So I've always actually been fascinated with Leonardo da Vinci. I once bought it's a really epic biography about him. Mm-hmm. I'd never read it, but I'm fascinated with him. Can you tell me a little bit about who the man was? Who was Leonardo da Vinci? And why are we so, I don't want to say obsessed with him, but interested in him?
Imagine, I think about this, because I'm dealing with a guy that's been dead for 500 years and wondering today who would either be of excellence, or that in another 500 years, who would we be talking about? Who would have our fascination? I'm not really certain. When I ask that question in my classes, some say, some musicians, maybe McCarthy. But I don't know. I don't know who can hold that kind of, that had that much of excellence in what he did. So what I would say about Leonardo, he's a man of a lot of dichotomies. Today we think of him as a painter, but really he only painted a dozen or so paintings. So he would not have been considered, that's a very small body of work for a painter of his day. So, what is he doing with all this time? Well, he's writing, he's writing everything under the sun. He does anatomy, engineering, architecture. So he's kind of really all over the board. Now, when you look at somebody's body of work like that, normally today, we're looking for an end result. We're going to be an engineer, we're going to be a doctor, but you got to kind of see the context in which he's living in. He's born out of wedlock. Okay, so he is never going to be holding a professional title. His dad and his grandfather would be today what we'd call lawyers. He's never going to be a lawyer. He's never going to be a mathematician like his mentor, Luca Pacioli, who was the famous mathematician and took him under his wing. And so really his body of work resonates with people today because he had this mentor of Luca Pacioli, the top mathematician of his day. So it's a bunch of dichotomies, I would say, about him. But he just seemed like to always stay anchored to whatever that Northern Star was. I think also the irony, look what his dad and his grandfather did. I mean, they were paid to be notaries. So what do? You're writing. And I mean, look what he's doing. He wrote 23 notebooks. We call them codexes, or in Italian, they're known as codices. Left us around 7,000 pages. And really, that is what is his longevity, is his writing. And that's where, we really go to. It's not, of course, this is a work of complete excellence. I mean, all roads lead to Rome when you're, examining the Mona Lisa in the way of, mathematics, painting, you name it. And that is also why he's well known.
In those words that he wrote, I think you said 70,000 or something.
Yeah, 7,000 pages.
7,000 pages. What was he writing about?
They're all these different notebooks. So let me give you a little background on his notebooks. So he starts these notebooks right when he starts getting a job with the Duke of Milan. Okay, so up until a teenager, he's been at the Verrocchio studio as an apprentice. He's been passed over by a lot of the other apprentices that are now going to Rome and working for the Vatican. So he's 30 years old, and he's now going to get a job with the Duke of Milan. So that would have been like working for the White House. So then he starts these notebooks, and there's a sad story about these notebooks. So when he dies, these 23 notebooks, these 7,000 pages, they are inherited by his apprentice, which is Francesco Melzi, who then he dies in the Loire Valley in France. And then Melzi, after Leonardo's death, moves back to Italy. Then when Melzi dies, his son inherits the notebooks, and he sees no value in it. So then there's this like a sculptor, art historian, Spanish, by the name of Pompone Leon, like your name, Leon. And he gets this bright idea to disassemble the notebooks and rearrange them based on subject matter. Well, that is a total mess, total mess, because now we don't know where he was in his life, in his career, when he's doing these, writing about, sayings or the anatomy, so it's taken, there was one expert scholar by the name of Carlo Peretti, that really put in a lot of time. He just passed away in redating all these pages. So it's it's a big mess.
What are the most inspiring things within the work? Like I've seen images that he wrote of helicopters. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what was that about?
Then again, none of these things came to fruition. Not one of his inventions came to fruition. None of his paintings sold for millions of lira. And of course, when he died, his notebooks had no value.
But did he actually come up with the concept of a helicopter?
Yes, and water shoes and, you name it. Yes, these are all drawings in his notebooks. And they're even do a TV series, redesigning them and trying to see if they could take flight. There's a whole program on his inventions and them remaking them to see if they actually worked. War machines, he was big on that.
So would you say he was a painter, a writer, an inventor, a philosopher? I mean, who is Leonardo da Vinci?
He's all those things. And going back to his birthright of being born out of wedlock, in a way, I think since he's not going to get pigeonholed, he's not going to be a lawyer. There was this freedom, this is the positive part of that, the freedom to be all those things. Because, he's not going to be pigeonholed in a profession because he can't have a profession.
Really? So when you were out of wedlock, that was a very serious issue in those times?
Yeah, it's not like today, you could be anything you want. You could, no. In the 1500s, that is not the case. That is not the case.
So during his lifetime, was Leonardo, you kind of touched upon it, but was Leonardo he wasn't famous by any stretch of the imagination, or was he?
He was, but, he had some problems that would have elevated his fame. One was he was the reason he mainly got the job with the Duke of Milan was he was going to build this bronze horse. It was known as the horse for the Duke. And it was going to be in commemorative to the Duke's father. And it was going to be the largest equestrian horse out of bronze ever made. And it was going to rear on its hind legs. So this is now in 1498, 1499. So he had gotten the clay model done. And then in 1499, the war breaks out. The Duke goes to prison and Leonardo has to flee. And so the clay mold, the French have invaded and taken over Milan, and they use it as target practice. And that's kind of one of the very, when you go through the notebooks, 99.99, it's like reading an encyclopedia. I mean, there's some nuggets of personal stuff. And that was one where he says the Duke has lost its roba, its libertà, and his liberty, and all of his works are not going to come to fruition. So that was kind of, and so if that had, it would have definitely put him on the map. That one would have put him on the map. And then the other thing that went completely bad for him was, and you don't even know about this. This is my new discovery. I know I did I've been on this for about the last 5 years. Okay. In Milan, Italy, at the Forza Court, Leonardo paints this dome ceiling. It's 2,500 square feet dome ceiling. You've never heard of it. It's called Sala delle Asse. So he gets it completed. It's phenomenal. In 7 months, the war breaks out, and then that also goes into sleep, and no one hears about it. Then it gets this revival in the 1900s, and it's a botched up restoration. Now the city of Milan is trying to restore it. They tried to get it done for the 500th. They're nowhere close. And so it's this blur of green haze, and no one's seen this unbelievable masterpiece he's done. It's 16 trees, hundreds of interlocking branches, 37 gold leaf cords that meander through this dense foliage of mulberry leaves. It's over the top complex, unbelievable. So I've just done a digital restoration, and I'm very, very excited. And I'm changing the name. I don't like Sala delle Asse, which means wood plank, which has no bearing on the fresco. So I'm calling it the Room of Knots. Anyway, but the Room of Knots, because it is an over-the-top extravaganza of knots. And it's probably fitting that I would be the one to do the digital restoration, since I'm into knots and Leonardo's knots.
I like it. I like it. Tell me, do you think Leonardo da Vinci would be surprised that 500 years after his death, we're talking about him?
I think so. I think he would blow his mind. I think if he came into our Zoom meeting right now and we told him, he would just totally blow his mind based on his track record. But then again, he might have been pleasantly pleased that he remained anchored to his Northern Star.
Mm. And what do you think his Northern Star was?
I think it was a journey of not transition. That's not the word I want. But these things do transform. I mean, it's like, nothing is fixed. Like he was very into thinking of things as a whole. I mean, his really, I don't know why no one has mentioned this one notebook page, and by the way, he doesn't date a lot of notebook pages. That's the other big bummer is, if he dated the page, we'd know when he did it, right? But he dates this one page. It's like November 1503 or something. And he says he's solved the geometer's dilemma of squaring the circle. So this was that was important to him, squaring the circle in, let's say, in sacred geometry. It's a marriage between heaven and earth. So that means all sides are equal. Now, the geometers today wouldn't say that that's possible, but, we're not going to tell Leonardo that he failed. So that was it. It was to be inclusive, that, everything, we were all included with equal parts. And I think that was his most important, because he does the octagons more than any other shape in his notebook. I mean, I've cataloged well over 100, and he does them every kind of way. He does them free form, straight edge, in action, standalone. And it's, these symbols is where I learned a lot about him. I didn't learn so much in his writings, about him personally, but in these simple symbols, the nonverbal world is what I call it. This is where I really found Leonardo the human being.
Was Leonardo da Vinci a kind man?
I believe he was.
Do you see it in his writings? Do you feel it? Is it historically mentioned? I mean, when I see his face,
pretty much to the cuff. If I could say he had a dilemma, it would be between him and his creator. Maybe that's why there's never been a major motion picture. When we get like with Michelangelo, the agony and the ecstasy, he has this dynamics with the Pope. He says he's a sculptor. The Pope wants him to paint the Sistine Chapel, and there's a conflict. So for Leonardo, his conflict is really with his creator. I don't see it with, found any other place, with a person or, anything like that.
Okay, cool. So now the $1 million question. You ready for it?
Okay.
I think you know what's coming. Who is the Mona Lisa? Who is she? Okay,
so I have some information for you on that. So I know that's what has, sparked everybody's interest from the day one. We definitively want to know who is Mona Lisa. I mean, I would say 5 years ago, there was this archaeologist, I guess, call him. He was able to do 3D imaging. He took King Tutankhamun, and he was able to recreate his facial features, right? So what he also got permission to exhume the few remains of the Mona Lisa. We think of that she's Elisa Gioconda, the wife of a wealthy silk merchant. But so he got permission. She was buried at a monastery in Florence, but he couldn't get enough bones to, recreate the visage to see if it matches up to her. So I took a different path. I was more interested in following the Mona Lisa. I call it the Mona Lisa knot. And I wanted to see if that led me anywhere. So that's what I really spent all my time is looking if this symbol, these today we call these trademarks, or logos. So, when you see a Nike, you see the swoosh, we call it a tagline. Back then they'd be called sacred meanings. So I instead followed these shapes, the octagon. So the Mona Lisa knot is made up of 4 rows. The top row is a chain of octagons, believe it or not. And then the bottom row is 6 cruciforms flanked by 2 hexagon or diamonds. Other than in the very center, he changes the pattern. So, and it's all about these knot crossings, very, very minor. This is not, rocket science. It's just looking whether the line goes over or whether the line goes under. And so what I realized that was his trademark. And so once I learned that, then I start going back through all his paintings, and he always leaves an interlocking knot on all his paintings. I mean, it's in front of God and everybody. You don't need an X-ray. You just have to, look at it. Just happened to be that I was the one that saw it. So you name a painting, let's say The Last Supper, very well known. Well, probably you didn't recognize on the lower right-hand corner of the tablecloth, he has a very specific knot that he does, which is called the knot of Isis. We find it in hieroglyphics. So Mona Lisa, again, you're back to your question, who is she? Well, again, she's surrounded in a lot of mystery. Okay, so if we look at just the facts, okay, let's just surround us with the facts. So there was one guy in Florence, brilliant idea. If she was Lisa Gioconda, the wife of a wealthy silk merchant. He went through all the archives of Florence, and he followed Lisa Gioconda. And so what we know about her is that she was a neighbor next to Leonardo's father, Sir Piero da Vinci. And so maybe that's how this work started. But we don't have any contracts. See, people go, oh, well, 1500s, no, they have great records from the 1500s. I mean, you would be surprised. But with the Mona Lisa, we have nothing. So again, looking at custom and practice of getting a portrait done. Okay, so if you were going to get your wife, let's say you're going to have Leonardo paint it, well, then you would go to Leonardo. You would make a commission. More than likely, there would be a deposit, and then when Leonardo's done with the painting, he's going to give it to you. Okay. So this is now the surrounding of Leonardo, if it was a commission. So he starts the painting in October of 1503 in Florence. And then he dies with the Mona Lisa still in his possession some 16 years later when he dies in France. Now, normally, if you've made a monetary deposit, I don't care what century you live in, you're going to go claim the painting. And there is no historical documentation of anyone from the Gioconda family making claim to the painting. Okay, so that's a reality. The other interesting thing is we should find some preliminary drawings of Mona Lisa in his 7,000 pages. I mean, most of his iconic paintings, we find, Last Supper, Lady in the Swan, even the one that sold for 450 million at auction at Christie's. We have preliminary Mona Lisa. There's a big zero. There's not one preliminary drawing of the Mona Lisa in his 7,000 pages of notes. So, those are the facts. Okay. He died with the painting. We have no contract. So, like I said, I followed the knot. And there's a little sidebar story. There was her name is Isabella d'Este. She was the Marchese of Mantova, a very small municipality, very boutique between Venice and Milan. Never heard of it, I'm sure. So, but she was a mover. She was the Jackie O of her day. And she really, really, really wanted her portrait done by Leonardo da Vinci. So she's unlike any other. She's a woman of her time. She can commission her own artwork, and she wanted her painting done by Leonardo. So, of course, the painting is not her. I'm clear that it's not Isabella d'Este. But what is her is a symbol that's on the dress that I can trace back to her.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you really are a treasure hunter and a detective. I like it. I like it. So we don't know who the Mona Lisa is. Another question that has always fascinated me is why on earth has the Mona Lisa become such a amazing painting, in the sense that, yeah, it's nice, but there are a lot of nice paintings out there. How did it last for 500 years that 500 years later, people are still obsessed with it? I mean, how did that happen?
Okay, it really happened when it got stolen in 1900. So the painting got stolen from the Louvre in 1900 by these Italian house painters. And when she went missing, they treated her like she was a real person, that this person got stolen, and, we needed to find her. And then there was a big regalia when we found her. It took 3 years, and and when she came back, well, that's really was her turning point. Then there was a focus about the Mona Lisa that endured. And then when Jackie Kennedy got permission to bring the Mona Lisa to New York to be on exhibit, they put her on a ship, and she sailed to America. And it was, this big festivity, this, in Italian, we call them the Granché on the Mona Lisa.
Do you know, it's fascinating what you just said. You basically said that the Mona Lisa has become real, that she became, after 1900, she became a real human. And she was, we think, 500 years ago, but for us now, she's real. She's real. She's the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's maybe why we're so fascinated with her. Yeah. Like, I'm thinking Jackie O got her to America on a ship. And I'm thinking, oh my God, is the Mona Lisa okay on a ship? What happens if the ship sinks? The Mona Lisa's going to die. What about all the other people that really are going to die? But it's a fascinating thing. It's like a fascinating human thing of like taking an inanimate object and making it into something that is so very real.
It's amazing. And, now her prominence, I mean, that's why she's got to be in this bulletproof box. She only comes out maybe one time a year. She has 14 employees at the Louvre Museum just for this one painting. She has her own curator. She has her own temperature humidifier guy that, just checks her humidity every day. I mean, if the truth were known, she cannot be insured. That's why she needs to be in this bulletproof box. That's how valuable she is.
It's like he captured the essence of human goodness. Like when I look at the Mona Lisa as she sits behind you, staring at us, it is that essence of human goodness that is being transmitted. And I think maybe that's also why it's so kind of has lasted for 500 years. I don't know. Do you get that feeling when you see it?
So, this, as a student of Leonardo, it was really a question I wanted answered. Why wouldn't you have done one preliminary drawing of her in your notebooks? Why? And then one day clicked for me. And I realized that everything he ever studied in art, science, engineering, mathematics, the synthesis of all his knowledge went into this one painting. And it was like his capolavoro. So, you asked me, there's only two ways this painting could come into existence. It was either commissioned or it was freelanced. Freelance is unheard of. And, you are a painter for hire. But I really do believe he voluntarily did the painting for his own purpose.
The way you just explained it, that he put all of his, let's call it magic, his specific magic into this painting, gives me a better understanding of what I just said about everything that is in this painting gives off a feeling of human goodness. That he put all of his skills, all of his lessons, all of his everything that he learnt on a spiritual level, on a philosophical level, on a human level, on a mathematical level, etc., 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 and crafted this thing of beauty for us all to see and feel.
Mm-hmm. I agree because, like I said, this is poster size. So, and he's moving a lot of times. I mean, he starts the painting in Florence, and then he's horse and bugging this painting back to Milan, then back to Florence, then goes down to Rome, and then he takes the last 3 years of his life at the Loire Valley under King Francis I. So it's important to him. I mean, everything about this, he's, all roads, as they say, lead to Rome. All roads lead to excellence in this painting. Any way you want to look at it, he used verdigris. I don't even know so much about that, but, that's a 3D type of paint pigment that he used. So, when people say the eyes are following him, well, that's the type of pigment that he was using. So all this was worked out.
So I'm going to go a bit left field here, but I'm going to go anyway. I don't know if you've heard of the Greek mythological figure Pygmalion.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So Pygmalion, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but whatever. So Pygmalion wanted a perfect woman. So he created a woman out of marble, right? Mm-hmm. And then this woman came to life, Galatea. Yeah.
Yeah.
The story gets a bit darker beyond that, but let's just keep it at the good part of it. And I get the sense that maybe, because I'm a little bit of a wannabe treasure hunter, maybe what Leonardo was doing was trying to create his perfect woman in a painting.
I think so. And then when we look at the symbol, in the sacred geometry, the 3, once I found that out, I'm like, why 3 to 2? 3, 2, 2. Well, 3 in sacred geometry represents male, and 2 represented female. So what he was doing was representing the whole of mankind, and that was really. It's almost like a rite of passage. I mean, when you start looking at the number 8 octagons, it's almost like, you have to go through a journey to feel that you can use the 8, the octagon. And, that's the other peculiar thing about him. I mean, here, by the age of 30, he's a master painter. Anything he sees, he could reproduce with absolute perfection. But what I find is that he likes the octagons. I mean, it's hard to find 8 in nature. It's primarily a man-made construction. And that is where his fascination is. Again, another dichotomy.
It's incredible. And I will never look at the Mona Lisa the same way after this conversation. Yeah. And it's been a true pleasure. And I will tell you something else. I give you my word that the next time I find myself in Paris, I will go to the Louvre and I will look at the Mona Lisa. And I will remember everything that we've had and talked about during this conversation, because it will enable me to look not just at a painting, but to look beyond the painting and to see everything. Because I think that is what makes the Mona Lisa so magnificent. It is not a painting. It is a mirror to our soul.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
I've been practicing that all day. No, that's not true because I don't even know you, but now I do. Look, it was a real honor. Thank you so much. You're very wise.
You're doing so many fun things. I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much.
That's so kind. And which part of the world do you live in?
I live in Silicon Valley. In my youth, we were called the Valley of Heart's Delight because we were all fruit farmers.
Okay.
But all our fruit trees now is Google, Apple, Facebook.
Yeah, well, we're neighbors. If I ever find myself up there, which I often do, I'd love to connect because, I mean, I'd love to like sit in front of the painting with you. I know it's not the real one, but sit in front of the painting with you and just feel it. Feel the painting. Don't look at it. Feel it. Maybe that's another little trick that the guy had. It's like, I don't want you to look at this. I want you to feel it. And you may look at it, but ultimately you're not really looking at it. You are feeling it. Mm-hmm. And it is expanding you as you feel it and watch it and see it with your heart and your soul. And you become a better human by just looking at it. I don't know. Who knows?
I think it is. I think you nailed it.
Beautiful. Well, look, thank you very, very much. And it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure for me as well. Thanks so much.
Bye. Hello, everyone. It's Leon here, aka the Kindness Guy. If you like my videos, which I hope you do, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also to ring the little bell so that the notifications notify you that I have a new video out in the world.